Do it. I dare you. Her voice knifed across the Colorado morning, too loud for the quiet pasture, too sure of itself for land that wasn't hers. She leaned out the window of that pristine white Escalade, sunglasses shoved up in her hair like a crown, one manicured hand wrapped around the doorframe, the other flicking at me like I was a bug on her windshield. 40 yards away, standing by the fence line, I had the megaphone in one hand and the release lever in the other. From here, I could see exactly where she'd parked. Both front tires square on the steel plate. I'd spent 3 weeks bolting to the grain hopper lift. 3 weeks of welding after dark. 3 weeks of replaying the day her people dragged my stock trailer off what they called HOA overflow land while she filmed from her leather seat and laughed. 3 weeks of checking county maps, consulting my attorney, and learning that sometimes the only language entitled people understand is physics. Today, we were going to find out how much Victoria Hayes trusted gravity. "Ma'am," I said into the megaphone, my voice rolling across the field, "you are parked on active farm machinery on private property. This is your final warning. Move your vehicle immediately," she answered by stabbing the gas. The Escalade's engine snarled, exhaust puffing, front end rocking on the steel plate like it was trying to shake my land off its tires. Then she shoved the window down farther and screamed, "You don't scare me! This is HOA overflow land! You can't tell me where I can park!" I watched the plate flex under her front axle, watched the cable line go taut, humming softly like a guitar string right before it snaps. Watched 3,500 pounds of luxury SUV balance on a hydraulic lift she didn't even bother to look at. I tightened my grip on the lever, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. Before I tell you how we got here, how a 62-year-old retired aerospace engineer ended up building a gravity-powered vehicle ejection system on his own ranch, let me know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because this story proves that sometimes the best response to entitlement isn't anger, it's engineering. When Helen and I bought this land 15 years ago, it felt like we'd finally escaped. 85 acres of rolling pasture in the foothills west of Boulder, pine trees climbing the ridges, a creek cutting through the eastern meadow, the kind of place where you can still see the Milky Way at night and hear nothing but wind through grass. I'd spent 25 years as an aerospace engineer. NASA contracts, defense systems, the kind of work where a millimeter error could end careers or lives. When I retired at 60, Helen said it was time to breathe. "Jim," she'd said, squeezing my hand across the breakfast table, "you've spent your whole life calculating stress loads. Now it's time to just exist." She was right, like always. We had 2 good years. 2 years of morning hikes, afternoon naps in the hammock, Friday nights at the local brewery, 2 years of the life we'd worked 40 years to earn. Then the cancer came. Fast. Aggressive. The kind that doesn't negotiate. Helen died on a Wednesday morning in May, holding my hand, telling me not to be so stubborn about accepting help. I'd been stubborn anyway. That was 3 years ago. I was 62 now, living alone in a house that still smelled like her lavender lotion if I closed my eyes and imagined hard enough. Most days, I kept busy. Tended the 20 head of cattle, fixed fences, volunteered at the VA, minded my own business, most days. But this Saturday, February 15th, 2025, was not most days. I was checking the water troughs near the western pasture when I heard it. That unmistakable purr of an expensive engine, too smooth, too close, too wrong for 7:30 on a quiet weekend morning. I set down the wrench and turned slowly. A white Cadillac Escalade, polished to a mirror shine, was rolling down my private access road like it owned the place. No call, no permission. No hesitation, just that quiet, entitled hum of money going wherever it pleased. I didn't shout, didn't wave my arms. 25 years as an engineer teaches you something important. Panic is the enemy of observation. So, I watched. The Escalade turned off the gravel and drove straight into my pasture, tires carving deep ruts through the soft spring earth. At first, I genuinely thought she must be lost. People get turned around in these foothills all the time. The county roads twist like spaghetti, GPS signals drop, and suddenly you're 3 miles from where you thought you were. So I walked toward the vehicle, hand raised in a friendly wave. The door opened, and out stepped Victoria Hayes. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew the type the moment she emerged. Mid-40s. Impossibly put together for a Saturday morning. She stepped onto the muddy grass in glossy red heels that had no business being anywhere near a cattle ranch, adjusting oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. But it was the outfit that really announced itself. A crimson-red blazer, perfectly tailored, draped loosely over her shoulders to reveal a black silk blouse underneath. The neckline cut in a deep V that would have been striking in a boardroom, but looked absurd next to my hay bales. A matching pencil skirt with a subtle slit moved with her stride as she circled the Escalade like she was inspecting a runway, not a cattle pasture. And that shoulder-length auburn hair, styled in perfect waves, caught the morning sun like she'd timed it for a photo shoot. Those glossy red lips, the same shade as her blazer and heels, curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She looked like she'd dressed for a power lunch and accidentally wandered onto a ranch. I took a breath, the kind you take when you're trying to stay polite, and walked toward her. "Ma'am," I called out, keeping my voice calm. "This is private property." She barely glanced at me, just clicked her key fob, locked the Escalade, and started walking toward the HOA neighborhood like she'd done this 100 times. "Ma'am," I said again, a little louder, "you can't park here." That's when she stopped. Slowly, like someone had interrupted her thoughts. She turned her head toward me, tilting those sunglasses down, just enough that I could see her eyes. "Oh," she said, waving one hand in a dismissive little circle, her red nails catching the light. "Relax, it's just grass." "Actually," I replied, "that's my grazing pasture." She looked at the ground around her feet like she was seeing it for the first time. Then she laughed. Not a friendly laugh. The kind of laugh that says, "You're beneath me and we both know it." "This is HOA overflow parking," she declared, adjusting that crimson blazer like she was preparing for a camera. "We've always used this area. It's documented." I blinked. "No, ma'am. This is my ranch. 85 acres. Paid for, registered, deeded." She smirked, those glossy lips pressing into a thin line. "Oh, you're new," she said, as if that settled everything. "You probably just don't understand how things work around here." Then, and I will never forget this, she walked around me. Not past me, around me, like I was a fence post. Like I wasn't even worth navigating a direct path through. She called over her shoulder, voice already fading. "I'll only be an hour. It's not a big deal." And just like that, she was gone. Those red heels clicking away across my land. I stood there in the pasture, staring at her Escalade, sitting crooked among the grazing cows. I had 1,000 thoughts I could have shouted after her. Things about property rights, common decency, maybe even the definition of trespassing. But I didn't. Because I've learned something important living out here. The first incident tells you who a person is. The second tells you what you're dealing with. The third tells you what must be done. And Victoria Hayes wasn't done. Not even close. If that first morning had been the end of it, maybe I would have chalked it up to a misunderstanding. A rude one, sure, but still, just a moment. But people like Victoria don't just dip a toe across a boundary. They jump the fence and start rearranging the furniture. 3 days after our first encounter, I heard that engine again. Same purr, same entitled hum. I stepped outside before she even came into view, coffee still in hand. And just like before, that white Escalade rolled off the gravel and nosed straight into my pasture. Only this time, she didn't stop near the fence line. No, she drove deeper, cutting a fresh diagonal path through the young grass I'd spent weeks nurturing after a late frost. She parked in almost the exact same spot she'd crushed the first time, like she was lining up for a repeat performance. She got out, that crimson blazer catching the morning light again, those red heels sinking slightly into the soft earth, and didn't even look my way. just grabbed her designer handbag, tossed that auburn hair over her shoulder, and marched off toward the neighborhood like she owned both properties. I walked toward the Escalade and placed my hand on the warm hood. Fresh tire tracks carved deep into the soil, grass torn and flattened. Every bit of it cost money and time, and for Victoria, it was just a shortcut. The second incident told me exactly what I needed to know. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't ignorance. This was habit, and habits, once tolerated, become rights in certain people's minds. But the third time, that's when I understood the real problem. It was early one Thursday morning, frost still clinging to the fence posts. I was walking the property line, checking for damage after a windstorm, when I heard it, not the smooth purr this time. A roar. Fast. Reckless. I turned just in time to see that white Escalade barreling into my pasture like she was trying to set a land speed record. Dust flying, grass ripping, a rooster tail of mud shooting up behind her. She wasn't driving through my land, she was storming through it. And this time, she was laughing. Window down, sunglasses on, music blaring, some pulsing pop song that had no business being heard by cattle. She even honked, twice, sharp, obnoxious blasts like she was announcing her arrival. When she disappeared toward the HOA gate, I just stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding with that familiar mix of anger and disbelief. That evening, when she came back around 5 p.m., she did the exact same thing. Same path, same speed, same horn, same complete disregard for the land that fed my cattle, paid my bills, and gave me the life I'd worked so hard for. And it didn't stop there. Within a week, her friends started copying her. Big, shiny SUVs, minivans with school stickers, a sedan whose driver had the audacity to wave at me like I was the valet. They weren't just using my pasture, they were treating it like HOA property, like a side street for their convenience. And Victoria, oh, she took it further. Sometimes she'd stop her Escalade right in the middle of the field, roll the window down, and film herself on her phone like she was making some kind of lifestyle vlog about her busy day. Sometimes she'd leave the engine running for 15 minutes while she rummaged through the trunk, those red heels clicking against the running board, mud splashing on the paint she'd probably just had detailed. But the worst offense came on a windy afternoon when she brought her little designer dog, one of those purse-sized things that shivers more than it walks, and let it run loose across my grazing area. My cattle scattered, spooked. One young heifer twisted her leg trying to get away from that yapping ball of fur. When I told Victoria her dog had nearly caused real damage, she rolled her eyes, adjusted that crimson blazer with both hands like she was fixing armor, and said, "Maybe you should train your cows to be less dramatic." The escalation was undeniable. It wasn't just that she didn't respect my land. It was the certainty carved into every gesture, every laugh, every dismissive flick of those red nails, that she believed she had the right to do whatever she wanted here, as if my property line interfered with her lifestyle. As if leaving me with broken fences, damaged grass, and stressed out cattle was just the price of living next to royalty. Standing there in the ruined pasture, I realized something. Victoria wasn't just entitled. She was testing me. And people like that don't stop when they get what they want. They stop when they meet something that won't be moved. And I was about to become exactly that. After the dog incident, frustration settled into something heavier. Something that sat on my chest every time I stepped outside and saw fresh tire ruts carved into my land. I've got a patient nature. You don't last long in aerospace without one. Precision takes patience. Systems take time. But even patience has limits, and Victoria Hayes was sprinting toward them, so I started simple. A sign. A clean white metal sign with bold red letters. No parking private property trespassers will be prosecuted. I posted it right where she'd been driving in, high enough to see from a distance. Reflective for mornings and nights. Hard to miss. I remember hammering it into the frozen ground, thinking, that ought to do it. No one can claim confusion now. Well, I underestimated Victoria. The next morning, I watched from my porch as she slowed down just long enough to read the sign. She leaned forward in her seat. those glossy red lips pressing together like she was reading something mildly annoying. Then she shrugged and drove right past it. Cut through the same path, parked in the same spot. Later that afternoon, I walked out and examined the base of the sign. She'd driven close enough that mud had splashed across half the wording. I wiped it off with my sleeve and stared at the fresh dent in the metal post. This wasn't ignorance anymore. This was defiance. So I escalated too. I added 4 more signs along her route. Private ranch, not hoe property, no vehicle access, do not enter, agricultural land, absolutely no parking. The next day, she breezed by all of them like they were yard sale decorations. That's when I realized I needed documentation. Real documentation. I drove into Boulder and met with my attorney, Tom Rivers. Good man, sharp mind. The kind of lawyer who reads every footnote twice just to be sure. I laid everything out on his desk. Pictures of the tire ruts, time-stamped videos from my trail cameras, a map of my property with her repeated entry points marked in red. Tom listened carefully, tapping his pen on the folder. "Is there a shared easement?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "Not a trace. I checked everything when I bought the place." He nodded. "Then she's trespassing. Repeatedly and intentionally. We can send her a cease and desist. Formally. That's step 1. So we did. Tom drafted a precise letter. Respectful, legal, thorough, stating my property boundary, proof of ownership, that all access roads belonged solely to me, that her driving and parking constituted trespassing, and that failure to stop would result in legal action and liability for damages. We sent it certified mail. Victoria signed for it. I had the receipt. For a moment, a brief, hopeful moment, I thought maybe reason would finally break through whatever barrier protected her from consequences. But the next morning, I found the letter shredded in my pasture. Pieces scattered like confetti after a parade. I followed the trail with my boot until I found one scrap that still had ink on it. A sentence from Tom's letter torn in half. Continued use will result in, right beside it, fresh tire tracks. That afternoon, I got an email from Victoria. Subject line: misunderstanding regarding HOA access. The message began politely, unnervingly politely, and quickly spiraled into a fantasy world. According to Victoria, the HOA had a historical buffer easement running through the western edge of my property. She even attached a map I'd never seen before, one that looked strangely homemade. It had a dotted line drawn in pink highlighter, a little arrow pointing into my land, a legend that said, Community Access Zone, and the HOA logo copy-pasted in the corner like a middle school project. I stared at it for a solid minute. It wasn't a county document, wasn't stamped, wasn't signed, wasn't even formatted like a real survey map. Tom later told me it reminded him of something a bored teenager would mock up in Microsoft Paint. But Victoria wrote, "As a member of the HOA board, I'm informing you that our community has used this access point for decades. We expect you to respect shared use rights." Decades? I'd only owned the land for 15 years, and the previous owner, old rancher named Pete, swore he'd never allowed a single HOA car through. I replied with exactly 2 sentences. "This map is not legally valid. There is no easement on my deed." Her response came in 3 words. "We'll see about that." And from that moment on, the tone changed. Her trespassing wasn't casual anymore. It was purposeful. A challenge. A message. Victoria wasn't just breaking rules. She was daring me to try to stop her. And as you'll soon learn, I eventually did. It was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time before the law got involved. Not because I called them first, but because Victoria had finally decided to weaponize the thing entitled "People Always Reach For When They're Wrong and Know It," victimhood. It started on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was repairing a gate hinge near the south pasture when I heard tires skidding somewhere near the barn. Not the usual crunch of gravel, something sharper, faster, more frantic. By the time I rounded the corner, Victoria was standing beside her Escalade, arms flailing like a windmill caught in a storm, that crimson blazer bright against the gray sky. In front of her, a sheriff's cruiser. Sheriff Dale Harrison, good man, reasonable, level-headed, was climbing out slowly, surveying the scene with that tired expression law enforcement gets when they know they've stepped into something messy. Victoria pointed at me the moment I appeared, those red nails flashing. "There!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with theatrical outrage. "That's him. That's the man who threatened me." Sheriff Harrison looked between us with a raised eyebrow. I walked up slow, wiped the grease from my gloves, and nodded politely. "Afternoon, Sheriff." Victoria spun toward him like a stage actress hitting her mark, one hand pressed dramatically over her chest. "You see? He's calm now. But you didn't hear him earlier. He screamed at me. He blocked me in. He ran at my car. I feared for my life." Sheriff Harrison's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, could you tell me exactly what happened?" Victoria's glossy lips trembled as she launched into her performance. "I was parking in the HOA's community access lane, the one we've all used for years, and he came running out of the barn, screaming obscenities. He said he'd tow my vehicle, that he'd deal with me personally. That I'd better pray the sheriff never finds out." She paused for effect, those red heels shifting in the gravel. He intimidated me. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, because none of that was true. Not one syllable. But the thing about lies is, when they're spoken with enough confidence, they almost sound real. Almost. Sheriff Harrison turned to me. "Jim, did any of that happen?" "No, sir," I said evenly. "Not a bit of it. But I can show you something." I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the folder labeled Trespass Evidence, and tapped the most recent video. The sheriff watched as Victoria drove straight past my signs, right into my pasture, and nearly clipped one of my water troughs. Then another video. Then pictures, timestamps, GPS pins, multiple angles. Victoria's face tightened with every image, that perfect makeup, unable to hide the flush creeping up her neck beneath that auburn hair. That's edited," she blurted. "He's manipulating things." Sheriff Harrison angled his head. "Ma'am, these are standard trail cam captures. Time-stamped, sequential, hard to fake." Victoria's lips, those glossy red lips, trembled with that special kind of indignation people feel when their lie isn't landing. "Well, you should be arresting him, not interrogating me," she snapped, tugging at her blazer like armor. "I am a member of the HOA board. I have rights." The sheriff closed his notebook with a soft thump, the kind of sound that lets you know he's already made up his mind. "Ma'am, being part of an HOA board doesn't give you rights on someone else's private property." She gasped like he'd slapped her with the Constitution. He turned to me next, his voice softer. "Jim, I've seen enough here to know this is a civil matter unless we catch her refusing to leave after being asked directly. I can file a report, document the trespassing, but you'll need to handle this through legal channels." I nodded. I'd seen it coming. Victoria, however, was not done. She jabbed a finger toward my signs, her auburn hair swinging with the gesture. "Those are illegal," she declared. "You can't just put signs anywhere you want. This is HOA overflow land." Sheriff Harrison adjusted his belt. "Ma'am, I checked the county parcel maps before I came here. This land belongs entirely to James Parker. There is no easement. None. You need to treat it as private property." Victoria's voice cracked with outrage. "I will not. This is harassment. This man is dangerous." I could see the moment when the sheriff's patience evaporated. He sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said, "Ma'am, the only danger I'm seeing here is you driving through someone's pasture at 30 miles an hour." That line hung in the air like a bell tolling in a church. Victoria sputtered. Her hands opened and closed, searching for a story that hadn't been invented yet. But Sheriff Harrison just tipped his hat to me. "I'll file the report, Jim. Document everything. And good luck." And with that, he returned to his cruiser. Victoria slammed her Escalade door, spun the wheels, and threw a thick spray of gravel across my boots as she sped away, that crimson blazer disappearing in a cloud of dust. I watched her go, mud dripping from my jeans, and realized something crystal clear. Sheriff or not, legal system or not, Victoria wasn't scared. Victoria wasn't backing down. Victoria was just getting started. There's a saying old ranchers use out here, one my father repeated so often it stuck to my bones. Land can take a beating, but animals feel it. I didn't fully understand that until the day everything changed. It was late afternoon, the sky hanging low and gray, the kind of evening where the wind carries a warning. I'd been tending to Molly, one of my gentlest heifers, pregnant with her second calf. She was a good girl. Sweet, calm, trusted me enough to eat right out of my hand. Cattle know routine. They know peace, and they know disruption. That day, she was grazing near the western fence, close to where the pasture met the property line. I remember patting her neck, feeling her steady breaths, the soft warmth of her coat under my palm, and then I heard it. That engine again. Louder this time. Meaner. I turned and saw the white Escalade flying across the field like it was late for an emergency. Music blasted from the open windows, some pulsing beat that didn't belong anywhere near livestock. Victoria's sunglasses glinted in the setting sun, that crimson blazer visible through the windshield. She honked, twice. Sharp, ugly blasts that echoed off the barn. Molly jumped at the sound, startled so hard she stumbled, her pregnant belly swaying. I felt my chest tighten. Easy, girl. Easy, I whispered, holding my hands out. But Victoria wasn't done. She swerved closer, kicking up a wave of dirt and gravel that pelted Molly's hind legs. Molly panicked. She bolted left, then right, legs sliding in the soft ground, eyes showing white. And then, with a heartbreaking thud, she fell sideways onto her hip. I dropped my tools and ran. By the time I reached her, Victoria was already gone, a trail of dust settling behind the trees like she'd never been there. Molly lay on her side, trembling, big, gentle body heaving with fear. I knelt beside her and pressed my forehead to her neck. It's all right, girl. You're all right. You're safe. But she wasn't. Not fully. That night, I called the vet. He found bruising, stress spasms, elevated heart rate, all signs of severe fright. He warned me, stress like this, especially this close to calving, can cause complications. I hardly slept. I stayed in the barn with her until sunrise, checking on her every few hours. Every time she groaned softly, shifting her weight like the pain wouldn't let her settle. The next morning, she miscarried. A stillborn calf. Small, lifeless, silent, lay in the straw. I sat there beside her for a long time, hands steady even though everything inside me churned. Molly nudged the calf weakly, not understanding. Animals grieve. Any rancher will tell you that. And right there, something inside me hardened. Not anger, not rage, resolve. This wasn't about inconvenience anymore. It wasn't about tire ruts or trampled grass. This was harm, real harm to a living creature who'd done nothing wrong. And the worst part? Victoria didn't care. She didn't even know what she'd caused. And she wouldn't have cared if she did. But the universe wasn't done stacking the deck. 2 days after Molly's miscarriage, I woke to find 3 vehicles parked in my lower pasture, a little impromptu HOA parking lot. There was a baby shower in the neighborhood, and apparently word had spread that the ranch guy doesn't mind. I stood there staring at the cars lined up in neat little rows across my grass. One of them had a balloon tied to the mirror. Another had a World's Best Aunt bumper sticker. One woman, heels sinking into the mud, waved at me cheerfully. Thanks for letting us park here. The cul-de-sac is full. I didn't respond. I just walked back to the barn, sat on a hay bale, and let the reality sink in. Victoria hadn't just crossed a line. She'd erased it. She'd spread the word, invited people, turned my home, my land, into an unauthorized extension of her world. And I realized something crucial. No amount of talking, warning, or paperwork was going to stop her. She believed she owned my land. She believed she controlled my boundaries. She believed consequences were for other people. So if she wanted to test me, well, I was finally ready to push back. And the the one that would change everything, was already forming in the back of my mind. After Molly's miscarriage, the world felt quieter. Not peaceful, just heavy. The kind of quiet that settles after something breaks inside you. I spent that night sitting in the barn, listening to Molly's tired breaths, watching the straw shift with every tremble of her body. And sometime around dawn, I made up my mind. Talking hadn't worked. Warnings hadn't worked. Law hadn't worked. Victoria didn't respect boundaries. So I needed something she couldn't ignore. But, and this mattered more than anything, whatever I built had to be legal, documented, defensible, because people like Victoria don't fight fair. They twist your reactions into weapons against you. So before lifting a finger, I called my attorney, Tom Rivers. I laid out the general idea, not the colorful version. Just the bones of it. A platform, a tilting mechanism, a gravity slide that would guide trespassing vehicles off my land and into a mud catch basin at the property line. There was a long pause on the phone. Then Tom sighed. Jim, technically, if you put up clear warning signs, if it's not designed to hurt anyone, and if gravity is doing the work, it's not illegal. Another pause. And, for the love of God, don't call it a catapult. I promised I wouldn't. The idea took shape faster than I expected. I built it like I'd built everything in my career. Methodically, precisely, with redundant safety features and multiple fail-safes. The frame came from reclaimed barn beams, 12 inches thick, capable of supporting 10,000 pounds without flexing. I bolted a steel plate to the surface, 4 feet by 8 feet, with shallow tire grooves cut at standard axle width. Underneath, I installed a hydraulic tilt mechanism salvaged from an old grain hopper, the kind farmers use to dump wheat into trucks. 2 heavy-duty steel cables connected to a counterweight system, a stack of concrete blocks hidden behind hay bales. The genius was in the release. A simple mechanical detent lock, the kind used on industrial gates. One pull on the lever and the lock would snap open, allowing the counterweight to drop and the platform to tilt smoothly backward at a controlled 15-degree angle. Not a launch, not a throw, just a gentle, inexorable slide guided entirely by gravity. The vehicle would roll backward off the platform and into the mud catchment trench I dug along the property line. I tested the mechanics obsessively, first with progressively heavier loads, a half-ton hay bale, an old rusted water tank. Finally, my pride and joy, my old Ford Ranch truck. That final test, I'll never forget it. I drove the truck up onto the platform, the steel plate flexing slightly under the weight, that familiar squeak of metal adjusting to load. I killed the engine, climbed down, and walked around to the release lever mounted on the fence post. I gripped the wooden handle, took a breath, and pulled. Clunk. The detent lock snapped open with a sharp, cold bite of steel on steel. The platform dipped, just a few inches at first, then more as the counterweight fell. Then, whoosh. The Ford slid backward like it had been waiting for this moment its whole life. Smooth, controlled, no jerking, no bouncing, just pure, beautiful physics doing exactly what Newton promised it would do. When the truck reached the end of the slide, it eased into the mud trench with a thick, satisfying squelch, front wheels still on solid ground, rear axle sunk 6 inches into soft clay. I climbed down into the trench, checked the truck for damage. Not a scratch, not a dent. Started right up in 4-wheel drive and rolled out of the mud like nothing had happened. The system was safer than most HOA speed bumps. I smiled so wide my face hurt. That was the moment I knew this would work. Now I needed to make sure the whole thing was airtight, legally and visually. So, I went overboard, with warnings. I posted industrial-grade signs around the perimeter, the kind with reflective lettering visible from 100 yards. Danger active machinery, unsafe for vehicles, automatic tilting platform, not HOA property, private ranch equipment, authorized use only. I photographed every sign from multiple angles. recorded a video walkthrough explaining the mechanism, the safety features, the warnings, filed copies with Tom, emailed a notice to the county zoning office, even sent a generic agricultural equipment safety notice to the sheriff's department. Documentation. Always documentation. But there was still one thing missing. To work, to really work, Victoria had to choose the platform. Not avoid it, not hesitate, choose it. So I made it irresistible. I cleaned the steel plate until it gleamed, swept away every speck of dust, laid a smooth gravel ramp leading up to it, painted fresh white lines along the edges like a proper parking space. And then I installed the final piece of bait, a brand new sign dead center on the platform. VIP parking authorized personnel. Only big, shiny, official looking Victoria bait in its purest form. Because here's what 25 years of engineering systems taught me. If you want to predict human behavior, you don't need psychology. You need to understand what people believe they deserve. And Victoria Hayes believed she deserved the VIP spot. The moment I hammered that sign into place, I stepped back and looked at my creation. A simple platform, a hidden mechanism, a gravity drop calibrated like a precision instrument, a mud trench waiting at the exact property line, a system that didn't harm, didn't launch, didn't break a single law, a system that simply said, if you choose to trespass, gravity will escort you out. And deep in my bones, I knew something with absolute certainty. Victoria wouldn't be able to resist. People like her never can. For 3 days after finishing the platform, I waited. Not with impatience, not with excitement, but with the quiet, steady patience every engineer learns. You design the system, you test the system, you trust the system. Victoria was predictable, a creature of habit and ego. She would come, and when she did, the platform would be ready. On the morning of the 4th day, the sky was bright, wind calm, sun warming the barn the way it only does in late February. I stepped outside with my coffee, and out of pure habit, looked toward the west pasture. And there she was. Victoria's white Escalade, polished so bright it looked like a pearl rolling across the horizon, turning off the HOA service road and onto my land with the confidence of someone who'd never once been told no. Her engine purred across the field, her wheels chewed through the grass, and then she saw it, the platform. I could see it in her posture, through the windshield, the way her back straightened, the way her head tilted, that auburn hair catching the light. The moment of recognition when her eyes locked onto that shiny new sign, VIP parking authorized personnel only. That was all it took. She didn't slow down to examine the setup, didn't question why a VIP parking space existed in the middle of a cattle ranch. She accelerated. I walked calmly into the barn, grabbed the handheld camera I'd mounted on the workbench, and toggled on the live stream backup to my cloud account. Then I took the megaphone, still flecked with old red paint, and stepped back out into the sunlight. I positioned myself 40 yards away, close enough for her to hear me clearly, far enough to stay out of whatever theatrics were about to unfold. The Escalade rolled up onto the platform with a smooth thunk, her front tires fitting perfectly into the shallow grooves I'd cut into the steel. She braked. The engine idled. 3,500 pounds of luxury SUV sat balanced on a device she hadn't even bothered to look at. She was exactly where she needed to be. I lifted the megaphone. Attention, driver of the white Escalade. You are parked on active farm machinery on private property. Move your vehicle immediately. This is your only warning. Victoria's head snapped toward me, those oversized sunglasses flashing in the sun. She leaned out the window, and I could see that crimson blazer, those glossy red lips already curling into a sneer. "Oh, please," she yelled back, her voice dripping with contempt. "I'm not stupid. Your little scare tactics don't work on me." I raised the megaphone again. "This area is unsafe. You have 10 seconds to vacate. This is an automated tilting platform. Move your vehicle now." Victoria answered by revving the engine once, hard, like she thought the sound of German engineering meant more than my property lines. Then she lifted one hand out the window, her middle finger pointed straight at the sky. The cable line beneath the platform hummed softly, tension building. I watched the steel plate flex under her front axle, just barely, the way a diving board bends before the jumper leaves it. I waited one more beat, let the silence settle. Then I gave her the final chance. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. If you do not move your vehicle, the system will activate. Gravity will do the rest." She laughed. Loud, sharp. That same laugh I'd heard the first day she walked around me like a fence post. Then she leaned farther out the window, that crimson blazer catching the morning sun, those auburn waves framing her face, those glossy red lips forming the words I'd been waiting for. "Do it. I dare you." That was it. The moment I'd known would come since the day she shredded my lawyer's letter in my pasture. The moment she crossed every line, ignored every warning, and volunteered herself for the consequences. I lifted the camera to capture her face perfectly in frame, made sure the timestamp was visible, made sure her license plate was clear. Then I reached behind me, grasped the release lever disguised as a simple wooden handle on the fence post. For one split breath, time stood still. The wind stopped. The birds went quiet. Even the cattle seemed to pause mid-chew. Then I pulled. Clank. The detent lock snapped open with a deep, cold, industrial roar of metal against metal, the sound of something massive and unstoppable being set free. Victoria's eyes went wide behind those sunglasses. The platform dipped. The Escalade shifted, tilted, the front end rising slightly as the back end started to slide. And then, exactly as designed, exactly as tested, exactly as physics demanded, whoosh! The entire vehicle slid backward, off the platform in one smooth, inexorable motion. Not launched, not thrown, not catapulted, just guided. Guided by gravity itself, 3,500 pounds of luxury and entitlement rolling backward at a controlled descent, straight toward the mud catchment trench I'd spent 2 weeks digging at the exact property line. The Escalade's rear wheels hit the mud first. Schlop. A wet, heavy impact that sent a thick brown wave exploding upward across that perfect white paint. The front wheels followed a second later, sinking deep, the undercarriage scraping against the edge of the trench with a long metal screech. Then the engine coughed, sputtered, and died completely. Mud covered half the windshield in thick, uneven streaks. The passenger mirror dangled by a wire, and that proud little HOA board member sticker, once gleaming on the rear window, now hung by a single muddy corner, swaying in the breeze like a white flag of surrender. Victoria sat frozen behind the wheel, sunglasses askew, mouth open in pure, unfiltered shock. The expression of someone who just learned, for the very first time in her life, that the universe does not revolve around her. And me? I took a deep, steady breath, because I knew what was coming next. The screaming, the panic, the threats, the sheriff. But I also knew something Victoria didn't. Every second of this, every sound, every warning, every choice had been recorded. She hadn't just parked in the wrong spot. She had parked herself into her own consequences. For a few long seconds after the Escalade settled in the trench, Victoria just sat there, frozen, mouth hanging open, sunglasses crooked on her face like they were embarrassed to be part of the scene. Then the screaming began, not just shouting, a full-blown, top-of-the-lungs meltdown. "What did you do? You tried to kill me! This is illegal! You're going to prison!" Her words echoed across the pasture, bouncing off the barn, scattering the cattle. I didn't respond. Not yet. I simply lifted the camera, steady hands, calm breath, and zoomed in on her face. Documentation. Always documentation. Victoria struggled with the door. The mud had it wedged shut, so she had to shove twice before it finally burst open. She climbed out, and immediately, one red heel sank ankle deep into the trench. She wobbled, arms windmilling. then yanked her foot free with a loud, wet schlop. That crimson blazer, once pristine, now had mud streaked across one shoulder. Her auburn hair had fallen across her face in messy strands. Those glossy red lips were trembling, lipstick smeared slightly at one corner. She looked nothing like the polished woman who'd driven onto my land an hour ago. She pointed at me with a shaking finger, mud dripping from her heel. "You!" she screamed. "You assaulted me. You set a trap. You could have killed me." I spoke slowly, clearly, like I was narrating for a jury. "Victoria, I warned you 3 separate times. You ignored every sign. You refused to move when instructed. You verbally dared me to activate the system. Everything is recorded." She shrieked back, "I didn't dare you. You tricked me." I pressed a button on the camera. Instant replay. Her voice rang out, loud and undeniable. "Do it. I dare you." Victoria's face drained of what little color the makeup hadn't covered. Then she did what entitled people always do when caught. She doubled down. "My husband," she screamed, trying to step forward and immediately sinking her other heel deeper. "The HOA. They're going to sue you. They're going to take this entire ranch. This is all public property." I raised an eyebrow. "That trench you're standing in? That mud? Belongs to me too." She took another angry step and sank even deeper, mud now covering both shoes entirely. Behind me, my barn cat sat on a fence post, watching the whole thing with what I swear was amusement. Victoria finally wrenched herself free, both heels ruined, and started stomping toward me, leaving muddy footprints on my grass. "I'm calling the police," she yelled, voice cracking. "I'm reporting you for attempted murder." I nodded calmly. "I already called the sheriff. They'll be here any moment." She froze mid-step. "You what?" "I called them when you refused my 10-second warning to vacate. Standard protocol for someone trapped on farm equipment." Victoria's eyes darted around, searching desperately for an angle, something to blame, some version of reality where she was the victim. She found nothing. And then, right on cue, I heard the familiar rumble of an engine coming down my gravel drive. Sheriff Harrison's cruiser. Victoria immediately transformed, shoulders hunched, hands trembling, breath shaky. Her victim performance was Oscar-worthy. She half ran, half stumbled toward the cruiser in her ruined heels, that muddy crimson blazer flapping behind her. "Officer, officer," she wailed. "Thank God you're here. This man tried to kill me. He tried to launch my car off a cliff." Sheriff Harrison stepped out slowly, removed his sunglasses, surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen every flavor of nonsense. The tilted platform, the mud trench, Victoria covered head to toe in clay, her Escalade sitting like a beached whale, and me, standing calmly 40 yards away with a camera in one hand and a megaphone in the other. He took a long, slow breath. Another hang-up. Victoria stared at the screen. The golden retriever photo now had mud smeared even worse from her thumb, only one eye visible, one floppy ear. The birthday hat barely recognizable. The dog looked more disappointed than before. Sheriff Harrison let out a long, slow sigh and flipped open his citation book. "Ma'am, based on the video evidence I just watched, the posted warnings you ignored, the property line you violated, and 6 months of documented trespassing, I'm issuing you a citation for criminal trespass on agricultural land." Victoria staggered backward like he'd physically pushed her. "You can't do this. I'm the victim." Sheriff asked me without looking up from his notepad, "You want to add property damage and endangerment of livestock?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." "She caused a pregnant cow to miscarry last week." Victoria shrieked, "You're all conspiring against me." Sheriff clicked his pen shut with a final snap. "No, ma'am. We're just standing on the ground. And ground, far as I know, doesn't lie." She looked at him, at me, at the sunken Escalade, at the crooked sticker, at her mud-covered phone, at the half-buried golden retriever photo staring back at her with one judgmental puppy eye. And for the first time since I'd known Victoria Hayes, she had absolutely nothing left to say. The tow truck arrived just after noon, its diesel engine rumbling down the gravel drive. Walt, the oldest and most cynical tow truck operator in Boulder County, stepped out with a slow, knowing grin. "Well now," he drawled, hooking his thumbs in his belt. "Ain't this a pretty sight?" Victoria didn't answer. She stood ankle-deep in drying mud, arms folded tight across that ruined crimson blazer. Mascara streaked down her face in lines she didn't seem to notice. Her Escalade sat in the trench like a stubborn hog, refusing to move, wheels half submerged, undercarriage packed with so much mud it looked like it had been dipped in concrete. That HOA board member sticker was barely hanging on, just one corner. It swayed in the breeze like a surrender flag nobody wanted to salute. Walt climbed down into the trench, boots squelching in the mud. He whistled low. That's gonna cost a fortune to clean out. Differentials full of muck, sensors are fried, underbody's bent. Insurance ain't gonna like this one bit. He glanced up at Victoria. "Might as well call it totaled, miss." Victoria let out a sound that wasn't quite a word, wasn't quite a cry. Just a broken exhale of someone watching their world collapse in real time. Sheriff Harrison handed her the official paperwork, his tone patient but final. "These are your citations for criminal trespass and property damage. Court date is listed at the bottom. You'll receive a mailed copy as well. Do you understand?" Victoria didn't take the paper at first, just stared at it like he was handing her a live snake. Sheriff waited a beat, then gently nudged it toward her mud-caked hand. Finally, she grabbed it. Mud immediately smeared across the signature line, across the court date, across everything. Walt began winching the Escalade. The machine groaned. Chains rattled. Mud sucked and squelched as the vehicle slowly, reluctantly, peeled free from the trench. The sound was awful, like the earth itself was reluctant to let go of what it had swallowed. As the SUV rose, a huge chunk of dried mud fell off the undercarriage and hit the ground with a wet thwop. It revealed a decorative decal Victoria had stuck under the license plate, one of those live, laugh, love things, except now it read, Live LAU LV. The G and H had been ripped completely off by the mud. Even nature was mocking her. While Walt strapped the Escalade to the flatbed, Victoria pulled out her phone one more time, hands trembling. She tapped the screen. That muddy golden retriever photo stared back at her. She winced. Even her dog looked like it was judging her life choices. The signal was weak up here in the foothills, but finally her email app refreshed. She opened one message, then froze. Her voice cracked. No, 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 no. She read it out loud before she even realized she was doing it. Dear Mrs. Hayes, after thorough review of your claim, we cannot process payment. Our policy covers accidents, not willful trespassing, not ignoring posted safety warnings, and certainly not what our adjusters are calling, quote, localized gravity experiments, unquote. She reread that last line twice, jaw hanging open. I had to look away so I wouldn't laugh. Sheriff Harrison pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered under his breath, Lord have mercy. Victoria sank down onto a semi-dry patch of dirt, shoulders slumping so low she looked half her original height. My husband, she whispered, voice barely audible. He'll fix this. But even she didn't sound like she believed it anymore. Walt walked over with his clipboard. All right, miss. Tow to your residence is $650. If you can't take delivery immediately, impound is $120 a day. He paused, scratching his chin. As for cleanup and repair on that Escalade, with the mud in the drivetrain, the fried sensors, whatever's cracked underneath, probably looking at $12,000 to $15,000, and that's if we're being optimistic. Victoria just stared straight ahead, glassy-eyed, like her brain had unplugged itself for self-preservation. Sheriff gestured toward his cruiser. I can give you a ride home, ma'am. She stood mechanically, following him like someone sleepwalking through a nightmare. Before climbing into the patrol car, she turned back toward me one last time. Her voice was small, smaller than I'd ever heard it. You're going to regret this. I met her eyes, held them steady. I warned you, Victoria, 6 months straight. Every chance in the world. She blinked hard once, like she was trying to process a language she'd never learned. Then Sheriff closed the door. They drove off. Walt followed with the Escalade strapped to his flatbed, mud still dripping onto the road, and the pasture finally fell silent. For the first time in half a year, I could hear the creek again. I could hear my cattle grazing peacefully on the far slope. I could hear my own breathing, steady and calm. Peace. Real peace. Not the absence of sound, the absence of violation. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. Not from Victoria, not from Richard, but from Green Meadows HOA, signed by someone I'd never heard of, acting board president. The letter was brief, almost terse. The HOA does not endorse Mrs. Hayes' actions. Her conduct does not reflect our community values. We offer our sincere apologies for the repeated trespassing and any distress caused to you or your property. No flowery language, no deflection, just accountability. Anonymous and grudging, but real. A week after that, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, mostly from the guy who delivered my feed, that Victoria's life had come apart at the seams. The HOA had suspended her board position pending a formal review. Her husband Richard had filed for separation and moved into a downtown condo. Her insurance claim had been denied in writing with the phrase, "localized gravity experiment," now permanently part of her insurance file, and her precious white Escalade officially declared a total loss. The frame had been bent, the differential destroyed, the electronics fried beyond repair by mud and moisture. Some people said she'd stopped leaving her house entirely. Some said she'd hired 3 different lawyers, all of whom quietly dropped her case after reviewing the video evidence. None of it surprised me. The land has a way of humbling people. Gravity, too. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun melt into the horizon, turning the mountains orange and the fields gold. No headlights cutting across my property. No luxury SUV idling in my pasture. No entitled voice screaming about HOA rights on land that had never belonged to anyone but me. Just quiet. Just my land. Mine. The kind of silence you can only earn by standing your ground, calmly, legally, and with the help of a little physics. Molly was grazing near the fence line, moving slower than before, but healing. The vet said she'd be okay in time. Physically, at least. Emotionally, cattle remember. But she trusted me enough to stay close when I brought her grain. That meant something. I rocked back in the old porch chair Helen and I had bought at an estate sale 15 years ago, and I thought about what I'd tell someone if they asked me what happened. I'd tell them the truth. I didn't touch Victoria's car. Didn't lay a hand on it. Didn't even get within 40 yards of it. Gravity did that. Gravity and a woman who spent 6 months believing that rules, boundaries, and consequences were things that happened to other people. And you know what? I laughed to myself, quiet and alone on that porch. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just letting physics do what physics does best. Apply equal and opposite force to every action. Newton would have been proud.